This is a very interesting situation.
It's a Wonderful Life is spoken of with such hushed reverence that it can be difficult to separate what we rosily remember from what it actually is.
Merry Christmas, movie house!
A masterwork of structural, formal, artistic and populist sophistication.
You're right. It's fact.
A box office disaster that would garner its classic status through dirt-cheap televisual syndication, and a copyright snafu that has kept it playing every December for half a century.
You're right again. You were correct. It's fact.
One of the first movies ever released as a CD-ROM.
Our research found a published report of a similar story. Yes.
A saccharine slice of hokey Yuletide schmaltz.
Wrong. It's a made-up tale. It's a total fabrication.
You see, It's a Wonderful Life steers directly into the black ice uncertainty of human existence, and in that bitter, slippery coldness, finds a road to salvation. And it's this person-centered sentiment that stokes such sentimental joy in everyone who finds warmth in its monochromatic glow. Unless you're J. Edgar Hoover, the HUAC, Ayn Rand, or John Wayne, that is. But we'll get to that soon enough.
You're thinking of this place all wrong, as if I had the money back in a safe. The money's not here. Well, your money's in Joe's house, that's right next to yours, and in the Kennedy house, and Mrs. Maitland's house, and
Fred's house.
Hey, what the hell you doing with my money in your house, Fred?
You can sum up the cruelty and beautiful resolve behind our protagonist George Bailey's existence with a simple, devastating joke. How do you make God laugh? You tell him your plans. This Yiddish proverb turned deterministic downer underscores the vast majority of It's a Wonderful Life. A cinematic crawl through broken glass that owes as much to the brutal trials of the Book of Job as it does to the novel on which it's based.
I'm at the end of my rope,
As a child, George goes half-deaf rescuing his drowning brother, and is later senselessly beaten for saving a stranger's life. His burgeoning manhood is spiked with death and the dashed hopes of a future he'll never know, and by middle age he's a stammering husk of defeated optimism. Broke and well past the point of breaking, he's left penniless, bloodied up, and facing prison through no fault of his own.
You're worth more dead than alive.
For a film often described as a whimsical ode to American idealism, director Frank Capra does everything to disabuse the audience of such simplistic notions. It's no accident that the fireside fairy tale of the opening credits is subversively juxtaposed with shots of frigid cold and in media res pleas of unseen strangers begging God to stop our hero from ending his life.
He never thinks about himself, God. That's why he's in trouble.
George is a good guy. Give him a break, God.
So settle in for the fleeting feel-good glory of those closing moments, because Capra makes no bones about dragging us through 2 hours and change of mewling desperation to get there. Elsewhere, a romantic meet-cute is cut short by guttural grief, wedding days are lashed with rain, the blessing of children brings illness and instability, and the booming success of everyone else in town is built atop the load-bearing bones of a man whose kind heart and moral fortitude has only gone to show the extent to which all good deeds can and will be punished. But not for a literal act of God, he'd be lifelessly drifting face down in a freezing river.
It's against the law to commit suicide around here.
Yeah, it's against the law where I come from, too.
Where do you come from?
Heaven.
So yeah, this is all way bleaker than a lot of us tend to remember. But by acknowledging the bleakness that makes all the sweetness surrounding it ring so true, I'm not pushing some revisionist retelling of a story known and loved the world over. I'm acknowledging what's always been there, the masterfully layered and pragmatic command Frank Capra had of what may have otherwise devolved into studio fluff. In fact, It's a Wonderful Life's elegy for working class collectivism and social equality was a bit too much for the pallid palate of 1946 America. It sank like a stone in theatres, nearly drove its financiers to destitution, and incurred the teeth-grinding wrath of the Reds under the bed scaremongering of the United States government. Who, as you're about to find out, deemed this
Buffalo girls, can't you come up tonight? Can't you come up tonight? Can't you come up tonight?
one of the most dangerous films ever made.
He's making violent love to me, Mother.
Just as with any piece of timeless art, It's a Wonderful Life cannot and should not be separated from its historical context. With the Wall Street crash of 1929 and the foreign and domestic toll of World War II just as pronounced a presence here as James Stewart's dancing, or this guy's spectacular accent.
That does it. Out you two pixies go, through the door or out the window.
Look, Nick, what's wrong?
The Second World War here is framed as another example of working class men forced to fight and die at the behest of powers above their station. Not to mention, yet another rod for George Bailey's back. Once again punished for doing the right thing, the deaf ear he incurred as a result of his childhood heroism leaves him barred from fighting for his country at a time when being declared 4F and unfit for combat came as a public shame and private blow many young men didn't recover from.
We came from a small town, and 3 fellows in that town that were 4F committed suicide because they couldn't go.
Capra also uses this war drive montage to illustrate the power of grassroots collectivism in aiding the greater good, while big businesses sit idly by or actively insert themselves into positions where they can profit from the belt-tightening economic downturn brought on by abject misery. Given the ongoing distrust of commercial and financial institutions following the Wall Street crash and the Great Depression it wrought, the situating of calloused hands and kindness as heroic and a monopolising banker as the villainous foil here makes total narrative and contextual sense.
George, I am an old man and most people hate me, but I don't like them either, so that makes it all even.
If the broader text here speaks of the battle between selflessness and selfishness, and the invaluable difference one person can make to the lives of thousands, the subtext of this seasonal staple skewers corporate psychopathy at every turn.
I know very well what you're talking about. You're talking about something you can't get your fingers on, and it's galling you. That's what you're talking about, I know.
George is robbed of a playful childhood by the need to work, misses out on higher education due to enormous college fees and the burden of saving the family business, forgoes a honeymoon to stave off financial ruin, and is trapped in a small town by his humanistic obligation to fight back against the winds of capitalistic encroachment.
Now, we can get through this thing all right. We've got to stick together, though. We've got to have faith in each other.
The Bailey Building and Loan, which George operates and acts as the lifeblood of this community, is, by definition, a socialist democratic enterprise.
Could I have 1750?
Bless your heart, of course you can have it. You got 50 cents.
Be it his refusal to sell out to Mr. Potter, or his failure to invest in his high school buddy's startup, a blunder that costs him millions, George has spent his life pissing into the hurricane and hoping it changes course, only to find himself dripping wet and dejected by a commodity-driven life he refuses to recognise.
You sit around here and you spin your little webs and you think the whole world revolves around you and your money. Well, it doesn't,
Mr. Potter, well, you know what you are? You're a little bitch. That's right, you're a bitch, and I'd bet you'd like to suck it, wouldn't you?
When our protagonist is shown how the world would look had he never been born, he's not shown a mustache-twirling caricature of depravity. What he sees is life as it actually is for the rest of us. The happiness by the kilowatt, strip-mined sham of a society a million miles from a meritocracy, divided into haves and have-nots based on arbitrary and unfair rules. Pottersville isn't a distortion of reality. It's what you get when mom and pop's freedom and justice for all is ground up so tax-dodging scum can snort the ashes of the American dream. Or if you really want to hack this down to the raw nerve, this film shows the villainous rich getting off scot-free, our hero being financially coerced out of offing himself, and an afterlife where the elderly still have to work and bust their ass for a promotion. Even the act of prayer here has been corrupted by the interjected importance of wealth.
Wish I had $1 million. Hot dog!
I wish I had $1 million. Hot dog!
Bedford Falls, a place where George is fighting the good fight. That's the fantasy. And that's why the titular life of this extraordinary film is so wonderful. It's the improbable hope of a reality that doesn't exist, but hypothetically could, with empathetic individuals, altruistic policy, communal power in politics, and the democratic beliefs of the people reflected by inclusive action. Bedford Falls represents the good that comes from rejecting selfishness and embracing the idea that a rising sea lifts all boats.
Good idea, Ernie, a toast to my big brother George, the richest man in town.
And if you're about to freak out in the comments by doing your best Jimmy Stewart impression and yelling, "Oh, hey, wait a minute, this in-frame ad whatchamacallit is making this movie I like sound an awful lot like dirty socialism, or heavens to Betsy, communism," then congratulations! You're thinking like the House of Un-American Activities, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Queen of All Chuds, and John Wayne, who once said of Frank Capra,
"Well, I'd like to take that little son of a bitch and tear him into a million pieces and throw him into the ocean and watch him float back to Sicily where he belongs."
Yep, the people who went after this movie, just an absolute nightmare blunt rotation.
Well, I've said too much.
In the late 1940s, J. Edgar Hoover instigated a campaign of media monitoring to sift for communist sympathies and Soviet influence.
Do you believe that the motion picture industry is doing everything it can to rid itself of subversive un-American influences?
No, the communists are everywhere. They report directly to Moscow.
Upon taking personal offence at the very idea that poor people were just as worthy of a voice as wealthy people, and recoiling in disgust at the prospect of government-backed financial institutions coming under public scrutiny, the FBI drafted a phone book-sized damning report, co-authored by none other than libertarian bridge goblin Ayn Rand, that stated, quote, "It's a Wonderful Life has employed two common tricks used by communists to inject propaganda into the film.
If I had my way about it, they'd all be sent back to Russia, or some other unpleasant place."
First, it had apparently challenged values or institutions judged to be particularly American.
In the whole vast configuration of things, I'd say you were nothing but a scurvy little spider.
And second, it grossly lionized values or institutions judged to be particularly anti-American or pro-communist.
This town needs this measly one-horse institution, if only to have some place where people can come without crawling to Potter. Come on.
In closing, the FBI and the House of Un-American Activities Committee both concluded that It's a Wonderful Life is a dangerous tool of the communist apparatus, and that by including George Bailey as an unsanctioned rogue element with the power to enact positive change, the film was, quote, "a subtle, dangerous attempt to magnify the problems of the so-called common man."
Just remember this, Mr. Potter, that this rabble you're talking about, they do most of the working and paying and living and dying in this community. Well, is it too much to have them work and pay and live and die in a couple of decent rooms and a bath?
That's right, folks. The feds, the worst person you know's favourite author, and the HUAC spent countless hours and taxpayer dollars on a grossly overreaching investigation that sincerely argues that this guy is the hero.
Misappropriation of funds, manipulation, malfeasance.
And this despicable pinko should be thrown to the wolves.
Look, little fella, why you go off and haunt somebody else?
To counter this nonsense without just saying being critical of billionaires isn't a hateful ideology, first, there's something deeply troubling about governmental institutions and the most hardcore free speech advocates hypocritically and systematically trying to destroy art in the name of bootlicking allegiance to corporate interests.
You once called me a warped, frustrated old man. What are you with a warped, frustrated young man?
Second, they accused a decorated military pilot who flew over 20 bombing missions against the Nazis, and an Italian-American immigrant who literally made propaganda films for the US Army, of being un-American, simply because they proposed that poor people aren't automatically bad, and rich people aren't automatically good.
You're crazy, that's what I think. You're screwy.
Also, for all its corporate critiques and need before greed characterization, It's a Wonderful Life doesn't preach of the death of capitalism. Everyone in the movie with money has an amazing life, a big wad of cash saves the day, and Mr. Potter faces absolutely no repercussions for any of the evil garbage he does. It's less a case of David beating Goliath, and more of David being bailed out by his congregation while Goliath sets his sights on stamping out the rest of the world.
Oh, Mary, look! Everyone gave me money so I wouldn't kill myself.
That's stupid.
There's a tiny, barely noticeable bit of set decoration in the Bailey building and loan that is so beautifully idealistic that I teared up the first time I noticed it. All you can take with you is that which you've given away. George Bailey is a good person, but not a perfect person. He gets angry, steals his friend's date, takes horrid digs at his girlfriend, then lashes out once she's his wife. The reason we grow to love and root for George isn't because he's an unattainable ideal, but because his selflessness, as so gorgeously summed up by this little framed phrase, speaks to a generosity of spirit that should be the norm rather than this altruistic exception. It's a Wonderful Life is a film that believes in us, and in love with this socio-economically and ethnographically diverse fabric of the American flag, calling out for a life we can all consider wonderful, regardless of who we are, where we're from, what we earn, or how we earn it.
We're still in business. We still got $2 left. Well, look, let's have some of that. Let's celebrate. Get some glasses, Tilly.
Whether you're left, right, or straight down the middle, whether the word socialism hits your ears like an equitable prayer or a hymn for the heathens, just about each and every one of us can find truth in these tribulations, take stock of this despair, and let loose our hearts when a good man finds his way home. Happy holidays, everyone. A lasso to the moon for our Patreon producers Jennifer C, Claire MD, Becky O, Hales and Rue, Historically Dumb, Jake R, Jennifer Fetish, and Nicholas Le Revere, and a flaming rum punch for all these amazing folks who support the channel over on Patreon. So, is It's a Wonderful Life in your seasonal rotation? Do you love it? Do you hate it? And how do you feel about the FBI trying to erase it from existence? Let me know down in the comments, and in keeping with the holiday spirit, if you could like, subscribe, and share this video with whoever you can, it's the best way to help out the channel, and if you're in a position to do so, consider signing up to our Patreon at the link in the description below, for membership to the In Frame Out Film Club, our private Discord, and to get your name in the end credits. As always, thank you for watching. Until next time, this is In Frame Out.